welcome to our next speakers. We have Steve Carpenter, Executive Director, GBS Digital at Merck, and we've got Tuhin Chakraborty, CEO and co-founder at Mimica. And they will be discussing what process mining missed and how Merck uncovered inefficiencies with task mining. Thank you both and welcome.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the introduction. So we're very excited to be here today with Steve Carpenter from Merck. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the strengths of task mining. Now, one of the challenges that we see with process mining is that it can give you good visibility into what's happening in your ERP system, but there's so many applications that are used outside of the ERP system in order to execute business processes. So people are working in Excel, they're working in Teams, they're working in invoices and PDFs and in their email. And in order to get true visibility of what's happening in the process, a lot of times you need to be able to see the employee work across the desktop in order to get a holistic view and granular insights into the inefficiencies that are happening. So, Steve, I'm so thankful that you're here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So can you talk a little bit, I guess, about what initially led you to task mining?
I mean, I think you kind of summed it up there. There's a lot of activities that happen in our processes that are inside an ERP system, but there's also a lot of stuff that doesn't happen inside the ERP system. And so when we use process mining, we can really get insight into that. We can really understand how the process works in the system. But what we couldn't get access to, and especially when we start to talk about things that are less transactional in nature, closing the books as an example, planning and forecasting as another example, even if there's a highly transactional process inside the ERP that has, basically long wait times in between certain process steps, that's where we don't necessarily have visibility because that doesn't exist inside the system. And so that's where, we really started to look at task mining as the capability to bring in to help us understand that white space.
Absolutely. And I know one of the things we've talked about in the past is also the use of task mining to kind of root cause any of the issues that are occurring. So maybe identifying a bottleneck with process mining and then using task mining to kind of get to the root cause of it. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is that an experience you've had?
For sure. Yeah. So we're looking at, we probably have, I would imagine, and I don't know the exact number today, but we probably have close to 40 digital twins in our process mining tool, which is very, very helpful and very, very useful. But like you said, if there's a gap in the process, if the users go off and do something in Excel or in Outlook or on the web or whatever it is that they're doing, and it takes hours to get back into kind of that ERP to take that next step, the question is why? And so this is where we have started to use task mining, Mimica specifically, to really dig into some of those areas. We're actually just talking about a project 2 days ago where we're looking at what happens when people are responding to incidents and service tickets within our ServiceNow solution. And one of the things we're probably thinking about doing is using Mimica to kind of dig into, well, how are they using ServiceNow and what are they doing outside of ServiceNow in order to get ready and to prepare to be able to answer those questions or resolve those incidents.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And being able to see what's happening, both in ServiceNow and outside is really important context. And this is actually tied to one of the common misconceptions that we hear about task mining. Sometimes people feel that task mining is only limited to certain tasks. But what we've developed at Mimica is the ability to map the entire end-to-end process at the click and keystroke level. So even if you have, something like an invoice processing, right? You can follow that invoice through all the steps that are enacted on that invoice, not just one person or one team, but across teams and across departments. But the difference with task mining is you can actually see, all the clicks and keystrokes involved. Now, I'm curious to know, when you were researching task mining initially, I know you looked at Mimica. I'm sure you looked at some other vendors as well. For those in the audience that are considering task mining, can you talk a little bit maybe about how you chose to evaluate the different providers in the task mining space and ultimately what led you to Mimica?
Yeah, so the first thing we wanted to do was really get at what is the process that's actually happening on the desktop. And so we looked at 4 different vendors, Mimica being one of them. One of them was really, the focus was really on you have to do a lot of training in order for the tool to understand what your tasks are. And it took a lot of energy to get to the point where we had enough training material in order for that to happen. And so it took us a while to get to an answer. Another tool that we looked at was really about, it really caused some performance problems because the agent was so large that it would actually slow down the operators' machines. And so they would actually have to change their process in order to accommodate the agent kind of sniffing and trying to figure out what's going on. The third tool that we looked at was really good in terms of performance and scale, but it didn't give us that real, that visibility into exactly how the process worked. It really showed us, well, they're using these tools, and they're basically, doing this amount of productive work versus not productive work, but it doesn't actually tell us what's actually happening. Because when we use process mining, when we use task mining, our goal is to really understand what's happening so that we can decide, can we eliminate steps? Can we reduce rework loops? Can we, get rid of bottlenecks? And then at the end of the day, can we digitalize or automate part or all of the process? And the only tool that we looked at that was able to do that was Mimica. And it was able to do it with performance. And it didn't, so it didn't cause any issues. It allowed us to do this without training. So we didn't have to actually train Mimica on what our process was. All the algorithms that you guys have built into your product, we're able to kind of sort that out for us automatically.
Appreciate that, Steve. And that's definitely something we've worked really hard on at Mimica. And the reason we work so hard and making it performant and delivering the results quickly is that a lot of times our customers are focused on time to value. They've got a transformation project or an automation project that they're trying to get into production quickly. And one of the things that we see is the manual approach to process mapping, where you're looking over people's shoulders and interviewing them and relying on these anecdotes essentially to get information about the process. It just leads to inaccurate results. And also it can take a long time to get the information. So I'm curious, I have a question for the audience here. For those of you who are involved in, identifying process improvement opportunities, maybe through manual process mapping, how long does it take to identify these improvement opportunities and to actually act on them? And while we wait for that poll to come in there, Steve, can you talk maybe a little bit about what was Merck's approach to understanding these type of processes, before Mimica came into the picture?
So, we use process mining where we could. But again, it gave us visibility into the ERP or the system-specific activities, the digital footprints that are in there, which was good, but it wasn't complete. The other way that we would do it was we'd, hire these fairly high-cost consultants to come in and help us do whiteboard and sticky note, try and do some value stream mapping, identify some Kaizens, make incremental improvements as we go. The way that we've done it, since the 80s, I would say, was the way that we were doing it before we found Mimica.
Yep, absolutely. And, those outputs, the ones that have been around for the 80s, that is essentially what we studied from a product perspective to try to recreate using AI. So essentially, that's really what we do is record employees and use AI to make inferences about their work. And the output, we try to align exactly to the type of Lean, Six Sigma, Kaizen analysis that these companies, that our customers typically do.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see the results of the poll here. I'm not able to see them now. So maybe there's technical difficulty on my side. But I'll keep going here. Oh, here we go. All right. So how long does it take to identify high impact process improvement opportunities and act on them? So good mix here. The vast majority saying kind of 1 to 3 months. a lot of people actually saying 3 to 6 months and more than 6 months, which is very common. And we've seen in some instances that it can take 6 months just to create a map of the process. And a lot of that is because you're not getting the information you need, starting and stopping. So maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about kind of the speed to the insights. Steve, how quickly you were able to kind of get the results out of Mimica after the recording.
So after the recording, it was a matter of basically a week to give visibility to what the actual transactions were that were processed, all the screenshots, everything associated with that, in all of its glorious detail. And then we decided which ones we wanted to really dig into based on some conversations with our SMEs, and we put that into your mapper tool. And the mapper tool came back in a week or two with what that process model looks like and what the variation is, what the standard path would look like, and then what kind of variation is associated with that based on how our operators are performing the process. So it was pretty quick.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really critical because the speed is important, and also to be able to aggregate all that data and present it back in a way that's digestible, something that's a big area of focus for us. So okay, you get the output out of Mimica, you see a number of different areas for process improvement. How do you prioritize and identify those quick wins in a complex organization like Merck? So were there any specific challenges in doing this before using task mining?
So how are we using, or how are we identifying those quick wins? Is that what your question is?
Yes. Okay. So maybe we can do a little like before and after. So how did you identify the wins, before Mimica, and then maybe if you could paint a little picture of what it was like kind of going through that process within the tool.
Yeah. So before Mimica, it was, there weren't a lot of quick wins. Obviously, again, we are a big process mining shop. So using process mining, we were able to find quick wins 100%. We weren't able to find all of those quick wins. We weren't able to dig into that white space that I mentioned earlier at all. And so it wasn't quick at all. What Mimica has allowed us to do, and the way that we use Mimica, or the way that you've kind of built your tool, is it gives us the visibility into the process that's happening on the desktop. And it tells us how automatable a specific process is, as well as how easy it would be to potentially automate. And I know you guys have got a bunch of algorithms associated with how to make that work, but it really identifies those tasks that are happening the most frequently, that take up the most manual effort, that allow us to really kind of dig in and understand exactly the types of things that we need to do. Now, several of those came out, and we didn't necessarily need to eliminate anything. We didn't need to optimize the process. And so what we did was we ran an experiment, and we basically took a process design document, a PDD, that came out of Mimica. We tweaked it a bit because we were using an older version of our large language model that didn't understand how to look at images. And we were able to feed that PDD in and ask it to build some Power Automate code. And within minutes, we had a prototype of a Power Automate bot that we could use to actually automate the tasks that we had seen coming out of Mimica directly.
That's awesome. And I know that that's, visionary in a way, because now a lot of people are talking about agentic AI and using task mining to power agentic AI. So you were able to actually take a PDD out of Mimica and essentially generate an agent or the code to execute a process automatically using a language model.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what we did. It was a generic language model. It wasn't, fit for purpose. It wasn't, to build a bot in one of our RPA programs or anything like that. But it was definitely, something that allowed us to build a Microsoft Power Automate bot almost immediately.
Really cool. Really cool. And, I want to talk more about AI and using it to optimize business processes. But before I transition there, could you maybe give one example for the audience of something that you identified with Mimica? I remember, seasonality was something that you guys found and did some optimizations around, but maybe you could share an example of something you identified with Mimica and the process improvement that came about.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things that we identified. Seasonality was one of them. So what we realized was that in our close the books process, that's a very seasonal activity, right? It happens a certain amount of time before the month end and a certain amount of time after the month end. And so what we realized was that we could start to standardize and harmonize our teams to really kind of complement each other in terms of the seasonality of one process versus the seasonality of another, and really kind of combine that activity together so that we could do it, with less manual activity. That was one thing. I think the other thing that we looked at was we identified that there were, in our certification process during close the books, we do a lot of commentary to basically say, here's what these results mean. Here's how they're different from last quarter, previous quarter, et cetera. And so we were able to identify a specific automation or AI project that we wanted to kick off that we had already started thinking about, but it kind of gave us that ability to kind of see the ROI in a much greater level of detail, because we were able to kind of understand exactly how much time people spent doing the commentary, on what they were doing the commentary for, and then we were able to kind of incorporate that into our commentary project, which was an AI project.
Really cool. So another example of using AI to automate something that came out of Mimica. So this is the perfect transition to another audience question. I know a lot of people in the audience are thinking about AI and using it to optimize business processes. So this question is, where does your organization stand in terms of using AI to optimize business processes? If we could kick that poll off on our side, that would be great. All right, and while that, oh, here we go. So I'll just talk through this real quick. Where does your organization stand in using AI to optimize business processes? So we've got still exploring AI, but haven't deployed it yet. I'm sure, a lot of people will be in that bucket. Piloting AI solutions for process improvement, using AI in some areas, but struggling with scalability. Successfully leveraging AI for automation and optimization, and AI is deeply integrated into our business processes. If anybody is in the last category, we would love to hear from you, because that would be a phenomenal case study. And I'm sure a lot of people will be very excited to talk to your team about what you've accomplished.
I'd like to do the same.
All right, quick poll there. Can we get the answers up on the screen? All right. So the vast majority of people are in the first category, as we might have guessed, still exploring AI, but haven't deployed it yet. The fact that Steve has got a couple in production is amazing, and I think you're ahead of the game, Steve. So certainly, I mean, if any of you, I'm sure, I don't want to volunteer Steve's time, but if anybody has questions for Steve, please do follow up with us, and I'm sure he'll be happy to chat with you about kind of what they're doing successfully at Merck.
Absolutely.
And unsurprisingly, not a lot of people are in that last category. So this is something that is a big area of focus for Mimica, because one of the things that Mimica can identify is, in fact, the automatability of a particular process. And not just whether it's automatable or not, but what is the appropriate technology to automate it. So you can put Mimica on 500 people's computers or 1,000 people's computers, and Mimica will automatically identify where those opportunities for AI are and give you a roadmap for how to deploy it. So we can sort of, map an end-to-end process and say, okay, this part of it should be done by vanilla RPA, let's say. This part of it, you probably need a Gen AI, large language model. This part of it actually should probably continue to be done by the human, and then all how you kind of stitch together all of these technologies in order to ultimately transform the process. So let's see. Moving right along here, I'm curious, Steve, after you do implement automation and some of these AI-driven improvements, how does your team go about ensuring that these solutions continue to deliver value over time?
Yeah, so we're in GBS, so our heavy focus, shared service organization, heavy focus is cost out. We have annual productivity targets where we're expected to reduce our cost footprint over time. So we're constantly looking at the cost out elements, but we're also looking at automation rate, rework rate, cycle time improvements, process quality improvements, user experience. And so what we try and do is we try and build what we're calling internally a control tower kind of view of what that KPI or that process KPI is that we're trying to go after. And so we would typically take a look at how that KPI started off, what that benchmark was, and then over time how that KPI improved or didn't. And then we would adjust from there to try and figure out how do we go after the original value that we were really targeting. So that's kind of our approach.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And there are a lot of people that are looking to observe processes over time, almost in a continuous monitoring fashion. And we did actually launch a product at the end of last year, essentially allows you to create benchmarks for your processes, and then ensure conformance to those benchmarks over time. You can even actually put in an SOP and ensure that people are following a particular process. Now, I know there are a lot of audience questions coming in that I don't want to ignore. Want to make sure this is a multi-way conversation. So let's try to run through some of these. And if somebody could shoot me a message and let me know how much time I have left, that would be great.
You've got 7 minutes to him.
7 minutes, perfect. Thank you.
Minutes.
Okay, first one, will Mimica automatically label tasks and show a process map? Steve, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, it does. Sometimes it doesn't, we have to adjust what it actually labels, but it's pretty good at kind of understanding what the process or the task is and making a label that makes sense. We definitely work through with our subject matter experts to try and put it into our specific language. Because the AI can only do so much. It doesn't necessarily understand Merck. But it does definitely do a lot of that labeling right out of the gate.
Yeah, and what we try to do is get it to the point where when you read it, you can recognize it, it makes sense. Now you might tweak it and make it really fit into your language, but there's more than enough information there for you to kind of understand what that process is. Now, I'll take this one. Is Mimica appropriate for in-house built technology? So the answer is absolutely yes. And that's one of the strengths of task mining, is being able to, or at least of Mimica, to be able to capture data across all desktop applications. We do work sometimes with banks that have old systems that are, terminal emulation. They're accessed via AS400. And so that's one of our strengths, is being able to not just deal with, SAP and Excel and those type of things, but also those bespoke applications that are sometimes hard to read. Thanks for the question, Marianne. So let's see what we got here. How does Mimica task mining roll up to the larger enterprise process mining structure? So I can answer this one real quick. So first of all, some people out there, have not yet invested in process mining, and that's okay. Mimica is completely a standalone tool, and if you're using it in particular areas like finance or shared services or operations, there's a lot of value that you can get from it, and it's not that it needs to be used in conjunction with process mining. Now, sometimes people who have process mining already, they want to marry these two data sets together and be able to see it all in one view. And because of that, Mimica created an export that allows all the data within Mimica to be exported or imported directly into your process mining tool of choice. And the way that we do that is we extract a case identifier from the data. Could be an invoice number, or if we take an insurance example, could be a claim ID. And this identifier is tagged across all of the steps and all the individuals that are working on that particular identifier. And so that allows us to create essentially a flat file that contains that ID, and you can marry that ID up with what you're seeing in process mining. You can also marry it up with your data lake. So some of our customers will, export all the data out and bring it into the kind of combine it in Snowflake with all the other data that they've been collecting from other systems. And they have, data science teams that are doing bespoke analysis on that basis. Thank you for the question, Nick. Next one is from Bert. This would be a good one for you, Steve. How do you cooperate with privacy rules when recording everything someone does on their workstation?
Yeah, that's a big deal within our organization. Every single project that we do, we are sitting down with the HR and legal representatives of the market, of the people who are actually going to be recording. In certain countries, we can ask for consent, and so we do. We ask for consent before we actually do any recording. The beauty about the way that Mimica is set up is that the person who's being recorded has full control. They start the agent. They can pause the agent if they're doing something that they don't want any screenshots to be captured around. So if they're working with their own personal information, they can pause the recording. And at the end of the day, they stop the recording. And so we make sure that they have an understanding that they have full control over when they start and stop that recording. But the other thing is, out of the box, Mimica will mask or obfuscate. Every single piece of PII that I've ever seen has been blurred out as part of the screenshot. And so from that point of view, we're able to kind of showcase to the users, here's what's going to happen if you record. It's going to show you this information, and none of that is personally identifiable. But then we also go through a lot of activities with the HR and legal organization to basically say, we're notifying our users, we're going to be recording you. This is why we're recording you. We're not planning to use it to understand how, personal performance. We're using it to understand the process. And our goal is to improve the process over time. And so those are all steps that we have to go through for every single project that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we like to say it's not a performance management tool, it's a process management tool. And even when you see the results out of Mimica, you'll see that there isn't, the emphasis is really on the aggregate data of what the team is doing as a whole. We take averages across the team. Even the map that is shown is, often an aggregate of everything that's being done. So in this way, we try to take the focus off the individual and really try to find those inefficiencies at the process level.
And the other thing I'll add is that we can also set it up so that every single person who records, they're just an SME1, SME2, SME3. We have no idea who actually provided the information for that specific task.
Absolutely. All right, question from Anna here. I can take this one. Does the tool measure new process performance and calculate the value versus the cost that the new process delivers? So I have an interesting case study from one of our customers. They were actually doing a system migration, and they were using Mimica to monitor the system migration and the new process that was going to be implemented as a result of that. And so they put the recorders on the individuals that were doing the old process. And then when they migrated to the new system, they were able to map out the process again and all the transactions. And they found that the process was actually happening more slowly than in the old system, which is of course the opposite of what was intended. And so they were able to use Mimica to root cause this issue. Why is it that, certain transactions were taking longer than expected? And we were able to compute essentially the cost and the slowdown. And then they were able to, I see you coming on here, so I'm assuming I'm at the end of my time. They were able to, fix the issue, and ultimately the system migration was very successful, and they were able to do that just in a matter of weeks. Happy to follow up there, Anna. If you have more questions on that, please don't
Yes,
hesitate.
absolutely. There have been so many questions to him, so we will pass all the questions to you, and if you can follow up, that would be great. And I would like to invite our next speaker, Jack Maloney, to join the webinar. I would like to thank Steve and Tuhin for the brilliant conversation. It's been very insightful, lots of engagement, lots of comments and questions in the chat. So thank you both for being with us today and for bringing such an interesting conversation on process intelligence, process mining online event.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, everybody.